According to Mark Twain, God created war so that Americans would learn geography. And well, the U.S. has never had a war with Paraguay. So until about 2 weeks ago, for someone who calls themselves Geography Geek, I knew very little about the country. In truth, I think my lack of knowledge comes down to the fact that Paraguay rarely makes global headlines. It's also landlocked, so it lacks beaches and iconic coastal cities that often attract tourists. And with a population of just 7 million and a modest economy, it also doesn't play a major role in global business or politics. From a satellite view, it looks kind of dull, just flat land covered in farms and forests. But based on what I've learned about other countries, I figured that probably wasn't the full story. So I decided to dig in and deliberately learn more about the country. So anyway, this video is essentially a collection of some of the most interesting things I've learned about Paraguay these last 2 weeks. We'll start with its territory. It's had some territorial changes over the years, made primarily through wars with its neighbors. But I want to talk about this section. It lost this area in the War of the Triple Alliance, a brutal conflict in the late 1800s where Paraguay fought against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. Paraguay was nearly wiped out and lost large portions of its land. Argentina claimed this region, but Paraguay refused to hand it over. The two sides agreed to international arbitration to avoid another conflict. In 1878, U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes ruled in Paraguay's favor and the land was returned. Since then, Paraguay's gratitude toward President Hayes, who was largely forgotten about in the U.S., has grown into something of a national obsession. His name appears on schools, streets, and even soccer teams, and an entire province bears his name. In the region's capital, there's even a museum dedicated to him. One interesting example of this admiration was in the late 1990s when a 17-year-old Paraguayan girl who had just woken up from a coma was given a wish by a local TV station. Her wish was to visit the Hayes Presidential Library and Museum in Ohio. The War of the Triple Alliance resulted in one of the deadliest demographic collapses in modern history. Estimates vary, but it's believed that between 60 and 70% of the country's entire population died during the conflict. The toll was even more devastating among adult males, with some estimates suggesting that up to 90% of them were killed. Before the war, Paraguay had a population of around 500,000 people. By the end, only about 150,000 remained, mostly women, children, and the elderly. The country was left physically and economically devastated, and its population wouldn't recover for decades. No other modern war has wiped out such a large share of a nation's population. Among the dead was Paraguay's leader, Francisco Solano Lopez, the only sitting president in the Americas known to have died in battle, killed in 1870 during a final confrontation with Brazilian forces. He was offered his life if he would surrender, but he responded with, "I die with my nation," and then tried to attack the group of soldiers with his sword. For a short time after the war, polygamy was either legalized or at least unofficially tolerated in Paraguay. I've struggled to find a reliable source confirming which. But the reason is clear. Less than 15% of the population was male, and the country faced a desperate need to repopulate. This wasn't the first time Paraguay had some interesting marriage practices. In 1814, Paraguay's leader issued a radical decree that prohibited Spaniards from marrying other Spaniards. Instead, they were required to marry people of indigenous, African, or mixed descent. This policy was designed to dismantle the colonial racial hierarchy and create a more unified and equal society. Francia viewed the Spanish-born elite as a threat to national stability and saw intermarriage as a way to reduce their influence. The plan apparently worked, and Paraguay developed a highly integrated society. Today, around 95% of Paraguayans identify as mestizo, making it one of the most ethnically homogeneous nations in the Americas. Though controversial, this racial integration also helps cement a strong sense of national identity, reinforced by the widespread use of both the Spanish language and Guarani across all levels of society. Guarani is one of the few indigenous languages in the world spoken by a majority of a country's population. In Paraguay, around 90% of people speak it, and it shares official status with Spanish. Unlike in most Latin American countries where indigenous languages were largely suppressed, Guarani became deeply embedded in national life. It's used in homes, music, and casual speech, while Spanish dominates in formal settings like government and education. Some English words for animals actually have their origins in Guarani, such as jaguar and piranha. After the War of the Triple Alliance, the country encouraged immigration to rebuild its population and economy. One notable group is the Mennonites, who began settling in the Chaco region in the 1920s and 30s. Many came from Russia, where they had lost military draft exemptions during World War I, prompting them to seek refuge in Paraguay, which offered land and religious freedom. Paraguay is a remarkably self-sufficient country, thanks to a combination of long-standing isolation, fertile land, abundant water resources, and a low population density. Paraguay's flat terrain, reliable rainfall, and fertile soil make it well suited for agriculture, which drives much of its economy. The country grows enough food to sustain its population and exports major surpluses, especially soybeans, corn, and beef. When it comes to water resources, the country sits atop the Guarani Aquifer, one of the largest underground freshwater reserves in the world, which supplies clean water for drinking and irrigation. Above ground, a vast network of rivers support agriculture, transportation, and trade. While Paraguay is technically landlocked, these rivers connect it to the Atlantic Ocean, giving it access to international shipping routes. The capital city, Asunción, often called the Mother of Cities, was founded along the Paraguay River and served as a base for Spanish exploration across South America. Water is also part of Paraguay's natural beauty. For example, the impressive Saltos del Monde, right outside Ciudad del Este. The country used to have another massive waterfall just north of the city, though sadly, these massive waterfalls were submerged in the 1980s by the construction of the Itaipu Dam, one of the world's largest hydroelectric projects. Though the falls were lost, on the bright side, the dam now provides around 75% of Paraguay's electricity and helps allow the country to export surplus power to neighbors. However, Paraguay's reliance on massive hydroelectric projects isn't without risks. In 2019, a major failure in transmission lines connected to the Yacyretá Dam triggered a widespread blackout that left the entire country of Paraguay, along with large parts of Argentina and Brazil, without electricity. Nearly 50 million people were affected, though power was restored within a few hours. Blessed with pretty decent geography, Paraguay doesn't rely heavily on food or energy imports, making it unusually self-sufficient for a so-called landlocked nation. While it still depends on other countries for manufactured goods, high-tech products, and fuel for vehicles, its basic needs are largely met from within. Though Paraguay's economy has grown more slowly than some of its neighbors due to historical isolationist policies, it has remained stable and resilient, avoiding major food shortages and energy crises, and influenced by foreign powers. In other words, its economy may not be booming, but it has been sufficient where it matters most, in securing food, power, and day-to-day stability. I have two short pieces of information that didn't fit anywhere else in the video. The first is that Paraguay is one of only 2 countries in the world with different designs on each side of its flag. And the other is about this weird tree called a jabuticaba, which is native to Paraguay as well as Brazil, northern Argentina, and eastern Bolivia, where it grows in humid subtropical regions with rich, well-drained soil. And that's all for this video. But before you leave, I want to quickly share a project I've been working on if you haven't seen it in my other videos. I've been learning Spanish for the last year, and have struggled to find content I'm interested in at the level I'm able to comprehend. So I created a website filled with articles to better immerse myself. It's completely free if you want to check it out, and I add content almost every day. I'm working on an English equivalent, but that's probably not relevant if you're watching this. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.